You're never too young to die. Welcome back, mere mortalites. I've got a very special book review for you today. It's a book that perhaps you might recognize it if you're a little bit older and used to read books, youth fiction books back in the day. Perhaps if you're a bit of a younger individual listening to this, you go, "What is this book?" Stormbreaker by Anthony Horrowitz. Stormbreaker was, and I'll actually pop up when this book was actually released. It was 2005, and throughout this book, and I don't believe that in this particular book it does mention it, but it's in the next one in the series. Regardless, the individual, or at least when I read this book, I was 14, 15 years old, and the protagonist in this book, Alex Rider, is 14 years old. I believe they revealed that I think something like he was born in 1987 in one of the books, so he was very similar in terms of age, if not slightly older than I guess I would have been when I was reading this particular book. And look, it's a youth fiction book. Is there things that now, as an adult reading it, and the reason I'm doing a book review is it's got a couple of very sentimental pieces about it, but it's also a book that I've recently reread as well, inclusive of all of the series. So, this book, read it well back in the day when I was 14 years old, and it hooked me, right? It was one of those where it was my first sort of set of series of fiction books that I really enjoyed. I went through the entire series. In fact, I've read it multiple times, this particular series. And one of the reasons why I've started to reread it again is I actually noticed that Anthony Horrowitz had more books added to the series. I don't know when the latest one came out, but I went, the inner young one wants to kind of go and reread them again and pick them up. And obviously, back then, I wasn't doing the podcast, the mere mortals. And I thought, you know what, I'll just do a bit of a book review on this one and take me back a little bit as well. So the whole principle of Alex Rider is a teenage spy. In fact, I think it's the back of the book, again, normal sort of blurbs. Every bored schoolboy's fantasy, only 1,000 times funnier, slicker, and more exciting genius. And it's a really, really fast paced book. So it's all around teenage spy doing loads of crazy stuff to try to survive and save the world, as you might imagine something like this book would have it. Stormbreaker was turned into a movie as well, which I remember watching and going, man, this was horrible. What is going on? The book, the actual story itself is, his uncle, Ian Ryder, passes away. He goes and figures out that, someone actually shot at him. Then he goes into the space of training with the SAS and MI6 in terms of becoming a spy. And he finds out that he's been trained all his life by his uncle and ultimately his parents to become a future spy. And in this particular book in the series, the very first one, it's all about him trying to stop a man by the name of Herod Sale from releasing toxins and killing all these kids through computers. Now, a few things, it's 2025 as I'm reading this, and this was released in 2005. A lot of the little intricacies within the book, talking about the latest and greatest technology, it shows you the dating of some of these things, which are, I find really interesting, where it's talking about the Stormbreaker, which is the name of these computers, and what it means for them to be the latest and greatest sort of technology. And as you'd imagine, or at least me reading it now, I go, wow, this is, ancient technology. But of course, at the time, when I was reading this book, I would have felt like, this is like the latest. This is pretty amazing. I got this vibe as well, reading it even now in comparison to way back in the day, in that it's sharp, right? Anthony's way of writing, and I remember looking this up a long time ago, he did research into all the various things that he puts into the book. So even though it was a youth fiction book, he actually gathered a lot of real life things of, what it is that happens at the SAS and the tracking and everything else. And then he puts it really punchy writing, fast sort of storytelling that there's always action in these particular chapters. Now, I haven't read a truckload of fiction books, especially maybe youth fiction books, or maybe this just in general, to find that they're so action-packed. So forgive me if this is just the general norm, but at least for me, untrained in these layers, I go, wow, this is always so action-packed. Every chapter, something happens. Every couple of sentences, something else is happening. He's surviving, death-defying circumstances. And I think in this one, a couple of things on top of my mind. getting chased by quad bikes shooting at him on the grass, surviving going underground in some water that's super cold and he can barely see, almost getting killed by a gigantic what it, jellyfish, like a men of war type jellyfish. So, just ridiculous. I'm flying, jumping off a plane and parachuting through the glass roof to save and stop the computers from being turned on. Just nuts, right? And I've got to take myself back because even reading it as now as a 32-year-old, I enjoyed it. I really loved it. Right, had all that action packed. But take me back to being a 14-year-old kid when I read this, and yeah, obviously the action, the excitement, loved it. It's probably one of the things that grew a lot of the passion of me in reading. But probably if I was to take away a key effective philosophy from the book, is the adaptability factor. So adaptability in the physical sense, but also in the mental sense to survive, to get things done. And I couldn't pinpoint if, what exactly led me down the path of more training and a more disciplined life and doing all these various things. But I've got to say, this must have some level of influence, because I remember as I was growing up and I was younger, I did have the fascination of special forces, and it's part of this book, kind of associated with the fact of like a teenage boy going through it. There was a physical prowess. There was knowing different languages. It's not in this particular book, but in another one, I remember, Alex Rider being in France drinking a grenadilla, and there was a particular drink that they drank then. I remember vividly reading that, going, "Man, this would be so cool." And so, the Anthony, at the very least in this particular book, as much as when I was young to today's world, just makes the individual, Alex Rider, not come to life, right? There's not a very deep, layers or tendrils of who the individual is and sadness. It gets better over time. But man, does it pack a punch. Man, do you not want to like put this down and you want to just keep on reading it? This, along with all of the other books, this one's 200 plus odd pages, but the writing is really quite large and easy, plenty of margins on the book. I crush these. I can read these in a couple of days easily, right? Sometimes people would sit there and just go through more than half the book. I took one of these, or at least this particular one, on a holiday, like a short holiday, and I read it all almost on the flight down to the particular location. So that's been my book review, Stormbreaker, Anthony Horrowitz, and a little bit of a background story around why this sort of books is well fascinating. Maybe gives you a bit of an idea of them here at the Mere Mortals book reviews, why we do some of the books that we do as well. I do know that Kyron also read this book, same as the Artemis Fowl series by Ewan Colfer, I believe. So, we've got similar backgrounds as some of the reading that has come. But the big effective philosophy that I take away is the adaptability to survive. This might be fiction, youth fiction, but man, I think the young one took away a lot of things into his life, and then today's world one really enjoyed rereading this. So Anthony, thank you very much for putting together Stormbreaker and the character of Alex Rider. Man, have I enjoyed it. For now, Mere Mortal Alliance, I hope you're well wherever you are in the world. One, out.